hola, hola, hola. Oh, double plenary? Girly
Oh my
three.
god.
Wow. Oh no, that's what it's before. Oh, I am. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our session that is very close to our heart. And in this session, we're going to talk about youth engagement with the United Nations and at the United Nations and out of the United Nations as well. All you see in this panel, we are all associated somehow with the United Nations. Me, myself, I am right now the representative for the AFS Interculture Program to the United Nations and also advisor to the UN uh, Department of Global Communications Youth Steering Committee. And with me, Shurabe, she is the member of the Youth Steering Committee for the UN Department of Global Communication. My colleague Steve have been with me on the same committee for over 6, 7 years now, and also the UN representative for the Tsushi Foundation. And we have Anika, who is the member of the United Nations Association of UCLA. And this, we were gonna have the conversation with all of you about how we work with the United Nations and what are different ways we get engaged with the best examples and how you can get engaged, and also would love to hear from you your opinion on what should be done on how we can do a better job in engaging young people's voices there with the UN. So to start with, I would like to give the floor to my colleague Shurabe Mercado to briefly introduce herself and also her opening remarks for this conversation.
Yes. Hi. Yes, I'm audible. Okay, thank you so much for the introduction. Hi, my name is Shurabe Mercado. I'm from Mexico. I'm about to graduate for my bachelor's in biotechnology engineering in Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico. So STEM girly here. But I consider myself to be a climate and social activist and advocate. I have tried to be involved and to educate myself in issues such as ecofeminism, innovation, youth meaningful participation, UN as much as possible, and well, participating for almost 6 7 years from the grassroots level to the national to the international. So yeah, that's a big little part of me. I'm really into sustainability too. I'm really into intergenerationality too. I have well, me and Steve actually were just um, co-members of the subcommittee of the of youth and the international um, subcommittee. Sorry, the titles of the United Nations Civil Society that just happened in Nairobi. So that was fun experience too. And what I can say, I'm really excited about this panel. I think it's really important that we talk from our perspectives. I know that maybe I'm the one that have has the least experience because of my years of involvement and engagement with the United Nations. But what I'm here to say and to talk about mainly is our perspective and my perspective, getting engaged, being involved from the outside, from literally wanting to be part of, wanting to be um, uh, getting to know the processes as they are, getting to know the platforms, what and how worked, right? And I think that's a really confusing process, and I think it needs to be talked out because sometimes I think that the United Nations, as transparent and as open as they are, and as the platform is, it's not sometimes and not many times accessible for youth in a specific. The resources exist, the resources are there, but what does it mean, and what help, or what's the purpose of the resources being there if we cannot access them, if people around the globe cannot or doesn't do not know how to get to them? So yeah, I'm a little bit into that perspective and that part. I'm really happy to share my experience and share the knowledge that I have gotten and the paths that I found that are the easiest to get through all of these so confusing processes. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thanks, Shurabe. Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Chiu from Buddhist Foundation. I serve as our representative to the United Nations, and I've been in this role now for over 10 years. I just celebrated my 10-year anniversary on May 5th, 2024. Thanks. But I've been with Siji since 1999. I was 7 years old, and when I was in like middle school, high school, I did a little bit of Model UN, but it wasn't ever anything like super big in my life. I was like, I'm going to Model UN because all my friends are there and they're serving cookies and snacks afterwards, and we get to talk, right? And I'm like, I'm a pretty shy person, so I wanted to learn how to talk and like engage with others. But it wasn't until I went to college that there was an opportunity for me to actually go into the UN and meet other young people who were interested in these global issues, where like my world kind of like opened up and I was like, whoa, like there's so many cool people doing tremendous work around the world and they're all so young, right? And that really sparked a catalyst in my heart to be like, how can I dedicate my life in service to others in a way that ensures that like as a young person I can leave an impact on this world. And so to that extent, I've now been in this ecosystem through different capacities. We serve together, Ali, myself, Shurabe, as part of the UNDGC Youth Representatives Steering Committee. I'm now like retired from that, so I guess I'm just an alumni. But in addition to that, like through the Interagency Task Force on Religion and Development at the United Nations, I serve as one of the facilitators to the co-chairs to the Multi-Faith Advisory Council. So representing like Buddhist perspectives in an interfaith context, advising the UN on how we can best engage on a multitude of issues and crises. And beyond that, representing Tzu and ensuring that our voices are heard across the UN spectrum. And so I guess I'm really excited to be here with you guys today. Similar to Shurabe, I think there's lots of winding paths. And so what I'm very curious to explore with all of you is like, how do you not step into the same pitfalls that we have? What are some of the grounding values that keep us like resilient and sustained in this practice? I know earlier in one of the panels, there was a question about how do we engage if financially it's not sustainable or tenable? How do we ensure that we can still actively be a part of that? And I'm happy to share that Citi does have some of those initiatives that I'd like to speak to. But then beyond that, I think also thinking from like a mindset point of view of like what does it mean to engage with the UN, right? Like the UN is a very shiny and sparkly thing. It attracts people. It's very spectacle oriented. There's like flashpoints and moments, right? But I think a lot of the real work happens behind closed doors. It happens in working groups. It happens in these very small microcosms of interpersonal relationships. And I'm very interested in exploring with you all what that looks like and how you can plug in and really be a part of that larger movement of impact and work.
Hi, my name is Anika. I'm here at UCLA. I'm an international development studies major, and I'm also minoring in European languages, transcultural studies, French, and Francophone. So, I'm really passionate about international development and how the world around us is, constantly evolving, constantly changing, and really what the youth can do to be involved in serving as catalysts for change. Because I'm sure, as we've seen on college campuses globally, there's been a lot of youth involvement in serving for change and whatnot. I'm also doing work this summer with NGOs who work to connect diplomats with the greater Los Angeles area and um, foster productive dialogue. And in the United Nations Association here at UCLA, we work a lot with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. And one thing I'm really passionate about is making sure that there are ways that youth can engage with the UN which is what we're here to talk about today, and no matter how big or how small of a way. In the UN Club, we do a lot of work with local nonprofit organizations, and we also work a lot with what is it? With directly with the sustainable development goals to foster change in directly in the Los Angeles area and more broad in across other college campuses with other UN clubs. I know we've worked a lot with Emma here from Soka University. So yeah, we host debates and whatnot, and I'm just overall like super grateful to be here and really passionate about exploring the different ways that the youth is able to interact with the UN on no matter the scale, because I think that one thing that we've seen a lot with the youth today is that they're ready to interact and ready to make lasting effective change remotely, directly on the ground, through policy, through advocacy, through the spreading of information. So yeah, I'm super honored to be surrounded by Ali, Shurabe, and Steve, and I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. Good introduction and good way to start motivated. I'm sure people back from lunch, they'll be feeling a little bit bored and sleepy. The feeling is mutual, so we'll try to keep it as interactive as possible and get you guys involved into the conversation and let you talk to us more. So start the conversation with like to be briefly from all of you. I wanted to know the journey, that why and how you choose to be get involved with the United Nations on the first place. Why and how? So we're gonna start with you, Shurabi.
I'm like, let me think about it. Um, okay, why, how does this happen? Many people ask me actually. Also, I wanted to connect it with the International Youth Conference, as many people tell me, how did you engage? How did you get to this point? I ask myself those questions every day too. No worries, no. But seriously, it was it's a funny story, and I think it's all in the sense that I was never looking to be engaged in the first place. It just appeared in the path, and it just appeared in a way, in my way, whenever I wanted to do something else outside my community, whenever I wanted to act on something. So whenever, well, since I was little, I was really worried about the social issues around me. Now, from my context, from Mexico, there has been, specifically from the gender perspective, a lot of um, issues, and there's a lot of problems. Mexico is one of the countries with the most statistics of feminicides, which is, if you don't know the term, it's more like popular in Latin American communities, but it's mainly just killing women just because of the fact of being a girl, you know. So we have a lot of cultural and um, patriarchal structure limitations and barriers in Mexico. And I was not there to be part of that. I wanted to do something else. I was just so tired of the same things, of being afraid, just to walk to the street alone by myself at night, uh, being afraid for my friends, for my girlfriends, for my mom, for my sister. And that's around the time also a big fight and a big movement of feminists came and grew a lot from the girls and from the women in Mexico. And I wanted to take part, but I didn't know how to. I wasn't well informed back then too. I was little. I was like maybe around 13 years old. I was around 14. But I knew that I had to do something. I had to also take part of the fight and not let down my girl friends and the movement as well. So as I came to the pad and I tried to discover more, I tried to engage more. I noticed that the same patriarchal systems were connected to colonialism, were connected to capitalism, to neoliberalism, to imperialism, to all of these modern issues that came from historical issues and are really rooted in the structures and the system that we live in. So that was really complex. And with that complexity, I also came to the SDGs, which are interconnected if you knew or didn't. So the same issues that I was trying to tackle also came together with the ecological crisis that we're living today right now, the climate emergency that is also interconnected. That's why I consider myself to be a feminist. And the SDGs, the whole problematics all come with the same or the similar causes. So I was really drawn into that. I was really empowered by the information and the resources, which all began also with the model United Nations, which is really funny. Because many people are really skeptic about model United Nations, but I think they really build you up into whether you're not taking good or bad solutions. I mean, there are maybe seen as like kids play or anything you're simulating. They are simulations, but you grow a lot and you learn so much about drafting, about negotiating, about others taking the postures of other countries. That also is also frustrating, to know that's the reality. But I came from being a muner and I got addicted. Whenever I found my passion in speaking up, in debating, in public speaking, I I started to look into so many MUNs in this time period. It was around 2020, the pandemic. And while I was searching like crazy, like a lunatic for more opportunities, and I wanted to engage the UN, I was feeling like ready to be a volunteer, but I had to be a legal person. I had to wait until 18 because you have to be at least 18 to be a volunteer. And I didn't know that, but I was ready to be a volunteer. I wanted to do something. I wanted to help children. I wanted to be that person, right? But I couldn't. The pandemic stopped me, stopped many people into helping and into action. So I started to discover all of these conferences, all of these forums, and I encountering one day in Facebook the IYC, the International Youth Conference, and others. And I decided to take part. I decided to take part in this event and others as a participant, in virtually, like many are watching right now. Um, and I never knew that I could literally have my proposals and my ideas to become a reality in the conference, because I had some good ideas about networking and people discussing with each other. Like, you didn't have to be like a high level speaker. So that's the moment where Ali and the organizing team back then literally just told me like, okay, that's fine, do it, like do it yourself. And I was like, what? And I learned that that was empowerment, and that I wanted that for many other young people to have, because I knew that if maybe you weren't really fluent in English, maybe you didn't had the confidence yet, but you have many things, many important things to say and many good ideas. So I wanted that for more people as well. So that was my like starts with the UN. Maybe we can get further into the story, but I will pass it now to Steve.
Pass it to Anika first because that way we switch it up a little.
All right, I can go ahead. So yeah, the reason why I found myself getting involved with the United Nations was, for as long as I can remember, I really liked history. But there was something off about it. I was like, we're learning about all these things, but there's really no practical, real application of how we're ensuring that these things don't occur again, how our existing structure powers that exist are either A, upheld, or B, dismantled, and how we can really move forward with creating effective change so that the things we're learning about in the history books and the history presentations are not occurring again. So when I came here to UCLA and I was majoring in international development, I wanted to become involved with the UN because it became evident to me that through the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, there's intersectionality in advocacy and in effective change and action, mainly produced by the youth. And so, what I mean by this is that whether it be the SDG of no poverty or of clean and sustainable cities, there's something for everyone, really, when it comes to like the betterment of the world and working with an organization as powerful and influential as the UN. There's something that everybody can do to be helping out. So whether you're more math oriented, science oriented, you care more about policy making, foreign languages, there really is a pressing global issue that can be right up your alley. And so I think in my UN club, one thing that has really spoken to me was focusing on like how everything in through the UN and through exploring the sustainable development goals is connected. So whether it be, having clean water for children or education or dismantling, you know, oppressive governments or whatever it may be, there's really something for everyone. And I think it's all goes back to being connected. And the way that the UN can, interact with the youth or the youth can interact with the UN and really serve as like global catalyst for change is through the fact that these existing power systems that we're working to dismantle and that we're working to challenge and reshape, reform, whatever it may be, um, the youth are the ones that are going to challenge these existing structures and move forward with it because they were not the ones that created them. They're the ones critiquing them and they're the ones looking at what can be changed for the global world. So I think that intersectionality was one thing that really drew me to working with the UN and being passionate about what the UN stands for and the Sustainable Development Goals, because it really just isn't about one facet of life or one structure or one organization or one country, and what we're seeing from what's going on in the Congo to what's going on in Gaza to what's going on all over the world. There are multiple issues that call on different sustainable development goals and at the end of the day, they're really all related to one another, whether it be no education or clean water or poverty or strong institutions. I think that every sustainable development goal is able to connect to another one in a way that is able to kind of make everything come full circle and make it so that if we work on one sustainable development goal, if someone does something as small as, create a volunteer initiative in their community or, involve others in their school or reach out to their local representative, it can create a very, very strong catalyst for change that will create a domino effect for everything else that's going on. And so, to wrap it up, intersectionality is the one thing that really drew me to the UN because I think that there's something for everyone there. And it goes back to whether it be decolonization or the challenging of imperialist structures or economic reform, whether it be no poverty from A to B, A to Z, whatever you want to say, there's something for everyone in the UN and something for everyone from every facet of life, every walk of life to get involved in and, really make a difference.
I love that. Maybe I'll just quickly jump in with a couple of notes and thoughts. I think the thing that drew me to the UN principally was like a recognition that like we're all suffering, right? Like the systems we exist in that are designed for us, well intentioned, do not serve us in this day and age. We find ourselves in like the worst progression of capitalism, where we've just gone to ultra capitalism, right? Where like people aren't seen for like foundationally being valued as human beings. We're seen as like resources to be extracted from, to be taken from, right? But we recognize there is this problem, but at the same time, within our own organization, we also model the alternative way of being, right? So we model what it means to live simply, to coexist with the natural world, to be self-sufficient and self-reliant, and really be in relationship with the food that we grow, that we eat, to have this sort of like coexistence to the natural world, right? And that's something that we're excited about, that we know is scalable, it's replicatable, and we want a platform and fora to share this. And the UN just happens to be like one of the best spaces, imperfect as it is, to have this sort of global conversation, right? When we think about what does it mean to shape global consciousness, the UN is one of those spaces and ecosystems that still retains its prestige, and level of like, I don't want to say splendor, but like this sense of like grandeur to it, where you're like, if you want to talk with other world leaders, where do you go? One of the first places you think of is the United Nations, right? But the UN also has its own drawbacks. It's a member state driven process. So no matter how inclusive they wish to create, at the end of the day, member states have the final say, right? So we're very much working like two steps behind the entire ecosystem and process to try to create this change, right? But if you're trying to influence, if you're trying to have these dialogues and advocate, I really do think the UN is one of those spaces that allows for us to not only showcase the alternatives to our current world state, but also share how like that journey is that we get there. And then I think also the other piece that really resonated well with me for the UN is recognizing that people are constantly being left behind, right? And if we know that like the UN's mission is to leave no one behind, then like what better place to have conversation about the most vulnerable and most marginalized than at the United Nations? And so these were like kind of the whys that drew me in, and then the hows, I guess Ali will maybe talk about in a little bit in terms of like how to integrate into that ecosystem. But I think the three things that resonated with me preliminarily has been mentorship, and so like knowing like having mentors to teach me what is feasible in an ecosystem, right? And like how do we speak with governments as opposed to speak at governments, right? These are skills. What does it mean to be diplomatic and to understand what can be said when in closed doors, open doors, right? Like those skills as a young person really required mentorship to have, and it allowed me to stay in the UN ecosystem without burning out. The second thing being asking that question of how can I be of service, right? I think everyone wants opportunities, they want moments to shine and to be recognized, but it's another thing to say like how can I be a part of this collective community? I may never be on that stage where that young person is speaking to the Secretary General, right? But in preparing the speeches, in preparing the research, in collecting the resources, we are an integral part of shaping that input and output. I think those opportunities exist but are less glamorous, right? But asking that question of how can I be of service has really served me well. And then the third piece of being like, how does this then go back to impact my community, right? Because if we just engage at a global level and just say a bunch of things and that's it, it's hollow, it's empty, right? But if there's ways for us to pull relationships and partnerships back to the local level and create that impact on the ground, there's beauty to be had at the UN. Yeah.
One thing I would just like to add, like, y- you all must be familiar with the Model United Nations, where you learn about the system of how the UN actually operates when it comes to the Security Council, General Assembly, Trusteeship Council. Well, that does not exist anymore, but ECOSOC and other processes. But what you people see over here, they actually get have been involved into actual policy making with the United Nations. And if you would Google and go look at the document that's called the Youth Climate Compact, and even the documents like that, we have negotiated those documents. We have really included young people's voices in such important inputs. It's what work they do, what work we do. I think it's really, really, really important because we're actually influencing the policy, the actual documents, actual outcome, and we're fighting for it. We're pushing for it. And with that, Steve, targeted towards you. How did we do it?
I think so. The Youth Climate Compact piece, I'll quickly speak to. I think a lot of it was done in consultation, right? Because realizing that, like, to thrive and exist in the UN ecosystem, you can't be just an individual representing one organization alone. You have to be really representing the masses, the voices. And so, to that extent, in the lead up to the Salt Lake City conference, we had a like multi-step consultation process where we brought together young people to speak to their concerns related to climate, and then really commit to what they wanted to do themselves, and then also call upon governments to take actions as well, right? Reflecting like this two-tiered system where on one side, we're not just asking for governments to do better and to have more ambition and to really commit to what we already promised to do, but also showcasing that we're going to model that for you, right? And like, if you're not going to take that action, we're going to first show you that it is possible and that it can echo throughout the waves of our communities and really build that power from both the ground up and top down. And then once we got to the conference itself, it was like pure negotiation every night until like 4 a.m., 5 a.m. We're like having town halls during the day, right? And then after the day ends, we go into the tank and it's like this giant stinky writer's room and it just smells so bad because no one showered yet, right? And then you're just writing and writing and writing and editing and discussing. And it's like, okay, well, these things were discussed during the town hall. What does that actually mean? And what's the nuance of it? And then how do we then create a new draft, right? Then at like 8 a.m. in the morning, the next draft is released. And then you go back into it and more town halls and they're like, you forgot my opinion. My opinion's important. And this is why it needs to be in the document. And you're like, I'm so sorry. And then you go back in the tank again the next night, right? And you repeat that process until you have a civil society negotiated outcome document, which then ended up being a GA resolution. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was a whole process and this whole system, but I think it really comes from first recognizing the importance of amplifying voices beyond our own and really trying to honor the collective community and giving people a platform, which I think has been replicated well here too.
So I have my own story to share, and I was ambushed on a flight to Salt Lake City, actually by one of the colleague. Now she's our colleague, but she was literally on a plane with me, and she knew that I was the planning co-chair, youth co-chair for the conference, and she's like, she knows we know that you guys are doing this outcome document, and I want to get involved, and uh, and I want to have my voice heard. And next thing I knew that she was in those writing rooms for next of the whole week. And this is how people get involved. And we are having this conversation because we want to tell you that's not a rocket science. It is something that you can also do, because we need these voices from across the board into having such broad consultations. We just mentioned about one. There is a whole level of the years of consultation by the youth to have a UN youth office. And now we're having a consultation for the summit of the future, and youth are actually getting involved, and we want more deeper and more engaged youth engagement in that. So with that, Shurabi, I have a question from you from the Department of Global Communications perspective. And we do a whole lot of youth engagement there, and then from there you'd go and represent into different conferences, meetings, places. They get a chance to speak. So how do we do this?
Okay. I think it's a really important thing, and I want to echo what Steve mentioned. And I think into adding that we have to know and really tattoo this to our brains, and the importance that, and I think this is something that many people have to know. People do not go to the United Nations or to these big international spaces for their individual necessities. One go like if you are chosen by your organization, your country, your delegation to represent and go there, you need to be sure and ensure that their voices are being heard, and that you are going to communicate in a way that you are representing maybe like more than 1,110 people that are behind you that couldn't go there, that are not attending, that are not participating, because you are, and you need to ensure that you are representing in a very well manner, and that even if you're not there with the other 10,000 and hundreds whatever number, that you're sending the message correctly. Okay, I think that's really important, what Steve said, and to honor the collective community. And I just want to also mention here in this part of the conversation that's important for us to not forget that yes, we're participating international, yes, we're outside our countries, our states, whatever, but to not let the connections from our grassroots level, from our local communities, be uh, be cut, you know and this is something that I had to remember and to remind myself for, because I was crazy, and I was like getting into all of these international platforms, events, as really excited young person, really energetic, really intense and everything, but I was starting to get disconnected from my community, from the problematics and the necessities of my people. I started to get into more international news than my local news, and that was a problem, because you have to have the balance, you have to have the knowledge, you have to be there, you have to get there to have the time, to get the energy, because if you are not there, then you are not representing well, then you are not getting and sending the message straight. And for that, you have to also be mature enough to know that you, and that time maybe you don't have to be the person being there standing up. You have to be mature enough to know that maybe you're not representing well enough, and for someone else to also take the mic, or for you to mentor, for you to guide, or be mentored, to be better mentor, be better guided. I think it's important to be, and to have a lot of self knowledge on what you're capable of, and to always push yourself forward, not for you, not for you, your recognition, not for your spotlight, but for the people that are behind you indirectly. And I really got to learn that from the Department of Global Communications, because as easy or difficult as it was for me to become a representative, and I'm part of the youth steering committee, which I'm really grateful for. It's important for us to know that you're there for something, and even if I'm just representing this one organization and this one NGO, you're also representing your country, you're also representing your local community, you're also representing, for example, in my case, women, young people in STEM, etc., etc. And you're giving that word, you're sending those opinions, those thoughts. So that's why it's so important, to be self-aware of those skills, self-aware of that information and that power, which is really, really big, no matter what representation level, no matter the president or the general assembly or this panel, you are representing something, someone. um, so that's the importance of it.
Thank you, Shurabe. Anika, I have a question from you, for especially from the UNA's perspective in UCLA. What are some of the projects that you do, and how the people can join you, especially the folks at UCLA who are interested, and what will be the benefit for them to join?
Yeah, okay. One of the really big things that we love to do here at the United Nations Association at UCLA is we want to involve the entire campus. So we don't want to only involve people that are interested in the humanities, people that are only interested in policy making, people that are history majors, people that have prior experience at the UN. We want to involve people in our club that, one thing that I've really noticed is that in our club, there are international development studies majors, they're political science majors, they're global studies majors, but there are also data science majors, statistics majors, computational biology majors, whatever it may be. There are people from all different academic facets. And so one of the really, really big projects that we like to do throughout the year, we do it a few times a year, is speaker panels that we call on professors and representatives from NGOs around the Los Angeles area, because I know, as Steve and Shurabe were sharing, it's really, really crucial to be involved in your local community and to not forget your roots, and to involve, to be present and advocate for international issues, but to also stay grounded and to really, be there for people on the ground and people that are dear to you and close to your cause, and, here, for example, on this campus with us. So one thing we really like to do is run professor panels. And one thing we've recently started doing was choosing one SDG that we want to center the panel around. So for example, I was planning a professor panel on sustainable development goal. I want to say it was number 11. It was the one, sustainable cities and communities. Yeah. And one thing that we made sure to do was to make it a really multifaceted discussion where we called on people from the Anderson School of Management, the business school, to let us know how, making communities sustainable, what type of business implications that has, and how we're able to do that from a management, business, fiscal standpoint. And then another thing that we work on is people from right here, the Luskin School of Public Affairs. And we really call on these professors and the people that have deep, extensive knowledge on social welfare, public policy, to let us know how the sustainable communities will be able to take shape in a policy sense, working directly with the mayor of LA, our representatives in Los Angeles, our chancellor here at UCLA. So how we're really able to move forward with sustainable communities. And then we called on people from the more STEM oriented side of campus, and we were asking them about how we're able to implement clean water initiatives, how we're able to implement sustainable energy throughout the city of Los Angeles, which houses over 10 million people. So I think that one thing that, to respond to all these questions, what we do here is we make sure to involve every member of campus, whether it's students, teachers, academic lecturers, TAs, everything in between. We make sure to involve everyone. And I think the overall benefit to the UCLA campus is for people to realize that advocacy has no major, it has no minor, it has no look to it. It's for the people. Advocacy is to make change that you care about, and there's something for everyone in change. So I think that speaker panels is something that we really like to do. And a big benefit to the UCLA community would be to learn more and to challenge misconceptions that exist that, things related to the UN are only for people interested in policymaking, or only for people interested in government. And honestly, there's change to be made, whether you're an engineering major, whether you're an English major, whether you're a history major. Advocacy and serving as a catalyst for genuine change in the world doesn't have a look to it. So I think that that's one thing that we really like to do here at UCLA. And then another project we're really passionate about is reaching out to local NGOs and seeing what we can do to help their cause on the ground. So we've talked to food banks in the downtown Los Angeles area. We've talked to nonprofits who work with educating the underserved youth of Los Angeles County. And I think it's really about looking in the cracks and crevices of the city, because the diversity of Los Angeles and obviously of the world around us is what makes us whole, and it's what makes us complete, and what brings so many different things to the table. So I think that one thing that we're really prioritizing here at UNA is looking for communities that often go overlooked, underlooked, whatever it may be, and really partnering directly with them and hosting initiatives on our campus. And then the last thing that we really prioritize is working with other schools. So obviously we work with SoCA University with Emma, and then we also work with USC. We work with other schools in the SoCal area, and also other UNA chapters to host debates and, really foster a sense of productive discussion for people to create policy change, because, everybody can bring something different to the table. And it's important to, while it's important to share, it's equally as important to listen, and to listen to people who have so much to offer, like the world-renowned professors here at UCLA, or the academic lecturers and the TAs who have dedicated years on end to studying this, or even the students who have personal anecdotes and personal, stories to share about whatever it may be. So yeah, we're really big on speaker panels and making sure that the diversity that we have here in what we call UCLA, in what we call Westwood, in what we call Los Angeles is nurtured, fostered, and really appreciated here on a local, international, whatever it may be, type of level.
I love this, and I asked Ali if I can jump in, because you said something about professor panels that just like sparked something in my brain, which is like, I think oftentimes as youth we look for opportunity, right? So I want to hit you with like three ideas real quick in terms of like, how do you expand engagement with the United Nations as a young person? What does it mean, and like how do you make it feasible? So I love professor panels because oftentimes, so I grew up pretty like alone. Right, like I was just a kid in the corner, and like just vibing out into tension because I was always too loud. But one of the things that I always was interested in is like, everyone's having a party. How can I get invited to that party? Right, and so I was always looking at other people doing their thing and being like, I want to be a part of that. right? But I never thought of like what would my party look like and who would I want to invite into that ecosystem, right? And I think professor panels in a similar way speak to something interesting in that like for UN engagement work, like it's such a broad topic. It's so much like diversity and approaches and insights and wisdom that can be drawn out. Don't wait for other people to invite you to their party. Throw a party and bring people to you, right? If you can't find UN people, like a UN opportunity to go to your campus, or sorry, for you to go to the UN, right? Because you're like, oh, I need an invitation from the UN to go to New York. Yeah, sure. But instead, like, throw a party and like invite UN experts or people who work with the UN in your local community to come meet with your community, right? Like collectively create that party yourself, right? But then you're like, oh, Steve, but I'm a student. Like, I don't have money. Like, how am I supposed to throw a party? I don't have enough space. And so the second piece I want to lift up is mutual aid, right? And this is, I think, something we collectively experienced during the pandemic, but it's a principle that can be applied even more broadly, right? And we do this a lot in Siji, and this is how we're able to kind of grow as a community within our own organization. And we take these same organizing principles to the work that we do at the UN, right? Let's say you actually want to host a forum, you want to host a dialogue. It's a 2-hour event, right? You need a space. Where can you have a space if you're a student, right? You have student centers. Maybe you have to pay money for that. You don't have money for that. You have people's basements, right? It's like having a collective and a space. Someone has a house that they can offer you a place, right? But you need to make the ask, right? Similarly with mutual aid, you're like, well, if you're gonna have an event, you probably want food, right? But I don't have any money in my bank. I can't have the food. But maybe one of the organizations on campus has a student budget that they're willing to collaborate with you to make that food appear, right? And it's all we have to do as mutual aid organizing principles is to sort of scaffold out what are our needs, right? And what is the desired impact. In bringing together people for this sort of conversation, here's the impact we'd be able to create, right? And then here's what is needed. I need $500 for food, or you have food yourself that you can cook and potluck over, right? I need $600 for space, or we have an organization that has space. And you, as the visionary and conduit of this idea, you create the party and you open the guest list, but then it's other people who are filling in the event venue, right? And all you're doing is you're bringing people together. And so I think like that principle of mutual aid is really, really important. And then the third piece that I wanted to lift up really is like the importance of taking initiative to speak out what's in your heart, right? I believe there's been a couple of panelists already who in their like inspirational segments have been speaking to like how like if you don't ask for it, you'll never have it, right? But in a similar way, less inspirational, more practical, it's like if I don't know that you're hosting an event, I can't sponsor you, right? Like I want to give you money to support your event, but if I don't know something is happening, it won't happen, right? Like there's not going to be that sort of exchange. If I don't believe in your vision because you haven't told me your vision, like we can't collaborate, right? And so similarly, I think finding a way to communicate what's in your heart bravely and then putting it into a quantifiable way that other people can see how they belong in your movement of impact, I think will get you closer to accomplishing that vision of engaging more with the UN, whether at a grassroots or international level.
Wow. Yeah. If you want to.
Just one more thing, adding on to what Steve just said. Yeah, here at UCLA, we work directly with other organizations that, some of them it makes sense that we would work with. Like we partner directly with Save the Children, which is, an organization that focuses on aid because most of the people affected by war are children. Most of the people displaced by war are children. Most of the people who are losing all facets of life, of education, of healthy meals, of running water, are children. So I think that, how Steve was saying, we really focus here on partnering with organizations like Save the Children and then also other organizations like language clubs or whatever it may be, that what can they bring to our organization and what can we bring to their organization, and we can all help each other and really, not separate ourselves for no reason, but make a catalyst and like serve as a genuine catalyst for change together and in a more united way.
Yes, thank you so much. And I want to jump in really, really fast to address some things that were, well, I really like the analogy that Steve mentioned about the party. But I just want to mention really fast that these open discussions doesn't need to be only accessible, but it's important to know how to jump into these platforms, to these conversations, to these discussions, and how can we speak out? Because normally you see the events in social media, you see what's happening, this, that, but I think we all ask ourselves, like, yes, that's really nice, really good, the presidents or the other people are joining, but how can I join? How can I be part of? So these consultative processes, all of these opportunities for you to join, I think it's important not to make it only accessible for us to transport, to get the information, to be educated, for make it clear for us that the opportunity exists and how to get there. Um, and it's important to notice that everybody can attend the events, because I want to tell you a little bit of a story. There was one girl in my community in Mexico that was organizing a trip to the high political level forum, um, but was only getting the youth, the delegation, uh, through her. And many had a lot of limitations, many had a lot of barriers, because they were depending on this specific girl, without knowing that you could literally go to the Indigo page and you could literally just register by yourself to attend these events, that you didn't have to know anybody in a specific, you didn't have to get this contact to be in that event and to participate. So it's important for everybody to know that these events are more accessible that we know, and these platforms, these agencies, these opportunities are there. And doesn't mean necessarily to be like that we are putting them by ourselves, like really high up, and thinking, oh, I could never be in General Assembly, oh, I could never be in the United Nations, I could never be in Geneva, etc., etc. But it's so easy that anybody can, well, maybe not anybody, but you can be there at some point. It's not impossible, and we need to know that's a reality. And I want to emphasize what Steve also mentioned. That party is amazing. I want to be there, but it's also about thinking what I want for me, what I want for my community, what I want for my own party. And I want to address something that I found really interesting about COP in a specific. COP right now is like the highest event for climate. It's like the top event, right? But there are so many other climate and sustainability events, not only also from the United Nations, but from local communities, from indigenous communities, that don't have the attention needed. And I just want to emphasize that, if because there are mechanisms, there are international tools available, but that doesn't necessarily means that has to fit to your necessities. If that doesn't fit your necessities, because internationally means also being really general for everybody to participate, but if that doesn't cover what you're fighting for, that doesn't cover what you're advocating for, you can create your own spaces, you can create your own panels, your own events, you can create your own community for your community and others to attend that, because that's equally important. Doesn't mean that you have to attend that international event and fly to the other part of the world because that's not necessarily the truth. And just for everybody to let you know that you can build your own and you have that power as well, even if it's not that important and that recognized. That's not the purpose, and that's not the main objective.
Thank you. Now we'd like to open the floor for comments, questions, suggestions, open mic, ranting, whatever you want to do. We are here to receive and answer your questions. If you have any questions regarding what we were talking, yes. All right.
Hi, all, and thank you, speakers, for your informative speech today. I am a regular attendee, but I also go to West Cliff University in Irvine, and I'm doing my master's right now. And my comment is that I'm potentially interested in creating UN club in our school as well. And if I could have your contacts, and if we can keep in touch and connect our two schools, I think it would be very cool. And I think it's important to take the action in our hands too, and to create like places for youth to interact with each other and share the same ideas. And I'm trying to do it right now, actually. And I think we don't need like titles to be leaders. Let's just be leaders for our communities, and let's do what we can and what we see. I mean, where we see the opportunity. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ana Paula. I'm from Mexico. Well, anyone can answer, but maybe Shurabe may understand me better. Well, I always thought that I will detach myself a bit from Mexico because I do want to make a change, but as we know, Mexico it's a bit difficult to make noise because there's a lot of people that have been silenced, and there's a lot of political violence. So I feel really close to the SDGs of gender equality and peace, justice, and strong institutions. But how do I make a change if I'm like in danger of being even murdered? So if you have any advice, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
And then third question over here, and then we go back.
You can come back.
All right, thank you so much for the speakers today. I have a question regarding how all of you been interacting with the diplomats at the United Nations, because when I observed the United Nations conference on disarmament issue, I realized that diplomats having informal conversation before the meeting starts. They care about their family. They talks about their well-being of other regardless their political views. And when it comes to the youth, yesterday panel, they were talking about intergeneration, the connect. And I wonder that human being interaction is much needed. And I wonder any example that you guys how to interact with the UN staff member or diplomats, because that is what exactly we can do in a small scale. And that's something that we can impact in our daily life too. So that's the question. Thank you so much.
So this is the most difficult question and the most difficult thing to do, and I will answer that because I think somehow we have mastered this art to have a difficult conversation with the diplomats, staff members, and even the head of the states. And I think the only way to talk to them is like you have to be really straightforward, because that's the only language that they will understand. There's definitely their language modalities, and there's different things that we use the terminologies and hocus pocus, or all those terms that we were talking about earlier. These terms are, I do understand that, difficult to understand for a common man. We're talking about youth engagement at the grassroots level. The grassroots language is something else, and that is very direct. What we have done, we made them talk to us. We try to reach them out. We have literally tried to reach them out. We have tried to talk to them, and 100% of the times there were rejections, because there clearly there was a communication gap, and they were not able to understand. And as Steve also previously mentioned, that UN operates in a very specific way, and that is member state operates everything. But things are now changing since the youth is getting involved, civil society is getting involved, you guys are getting involved. And the only way to get involved and make them talk to you is when you act. IYC is making impact. All of the UN agencies get they come to us, we interact with them, and you can see all the logos on this flyer for different UN agencies that we are now working with, and they're part of this conversation because they have seen a value and the action in it. We have to show them that, hey, this is what we want, because we were talking, we were telling them that, hey, you need to do this. Can you do this? And we will be part of it. Can you do this? We hope you do this. Will you do this? So we were using these things. They did not understand until we did it. We showed them that this is how you can get engaged with the young people, and this is how to do it. This is, I think, a difficult way of doing it, but this is, I think, the only way we got successful with, that we were able to show them that what we are doing and now they are coming and talking to us, and now we are talking to them in our own language, we are talking to them in our own terminologies and modalities. Now they're understanding that what we mean, what is needed. And that is why we are having this conversation. They're listening to this conversation, and so many people will be here interacting with you. The only way was when we had to show them. Difficult one, but it is doable.
Oh yeah, to reply to your question about the club, yeah, for sure. Here at UCLA, we really like working with other schools and stuff, and we believe that there's, you know, cliche as it may be, power in numbers, and I think that it's really, you know, rewarding and fulfilling to be able to hear perspectives and dialogue from other campuses. So I think I really would say that like we should definitely connect and that it's awesome for campuses wherever how close or far they may be to form connections with one another. And it's great that you want to start a UN club at your campus because it's a really, you know, one thing I love about, you know, being involved in the United Nations is that there's opportunities, like how I was saying before, opportunities for everyone. And also, you know, you don't have to be a specific major. It's not geared towards any type of like one cause. It's honestly like super far from that. Like there's so many different causes. If you're passionate about getting girls more involved in the tech industry, or if you're passionate about increasing the amount of people of color in legislative positions or whatever it may be, you can do that and you can form change and act as a catalyst for change in your local community, on your campus, and through working with other campuses. So I think that's a great thing. And yeah.
And I want to jump to the question about like the political violence, persecution, and everything. And I was writing my response because I have to write things because if not, it's all really just confusing in my head. And I hope I don't cry because this is a really sensitive topic as well for me. I know that for the Latino community, and I know also for the global South, for the developing countries, is also something so important and so many times not mentioned because it's something that's uncomfortable. I mean, people are getting killed. We live in the countries where the job that it's the most literally the most dangerous is not even being a criminal, is not being from the narco or anything, is being a journalist. Literally just journalist is just so dangerous. Being a territorial land defender is so dangerous to become and to publicly mention whenever you're in Latin America and whenever you're in the grassroots and the forefront. Fighting is so difficult and so dangerous because we have heard so many stories from the territory defenders, from the people that have been there, that have been killed and that are assassinated just for the sake of um, defending and fighting for their communities. And this is something that I do want to talk about because I have struggled myself in the way that I have privileges. We are also privileged to be here right now, but I know that many other people do not possess this privilege. And with that, my parents, I have the greatest privilege for my parents to take care of me in a specific, but they are also really afraid in that part of taking care of their children and knowing the dangerous part of living in Latin America, of being a girl, of defending and advocating. They are really scared for me, for my life as well. Whenever I tell them that I want to go into a strike, whenever I want to go into a protest, it's really many times difficult because there's the barriers and there's the like two paths and there's the two decisions that you have to make, whether you want to fight and you want to go there to the front with the other people that are fighting, you want to go to the strikes, you want to go to the city, you want to go to the to the municipal palace, to literally shout and scream and get all of your frustration out. You want to let people know what you're fighting for and what's wrong about the country, what's wrong about the government, and you're demanding that, and that's your right, right? But that's the other path about being of not letting down your parents, in a sense that you don't want them to be scared for your own life. You don't want that for them. You don't want that for your community as well. So it's kind of a fight between ourselves. But I do want to state that with all of this civil repression, with all of this dangerous world that we live in, our communities, I think it's important to stand strong and to rebel every time if it's necessary. Even if you don't have the means to go to the strike, you don't have the means to go to the protests because X, J, Y, Z, whatever, you can do something. I mean, there's social media. I know that maybe you want to be there, but there's social media, there's the funding, there's the donations, there's the signing petitions. So there's so many things that you want and you can do. You can voice others voices, you can give them the platform, you can give them the microphone, you can share, you can raise awareness. So I think these are the options that we have also as youth that are depending from our parents. We're children, we're still teenagers that cannot go into the world by themselves, and etc etc. But I think these are the things that we can do. But if you have the option, if you have the opportunity to be there, to stay in the front, with our education, with our knowledge, we know how to get to the policy decision makers. We know how to get to them. So if we maybe um, cannot be in the forefront, we may have the options and we may have the means to have a little or a big protection to those who are, um, to support them with the resources as well, to fund them, to raise awareness, to communicate with them, to approach them. I think it's all about building a strong community networks. um, it's about the support, it's about the protection, it's about the resources, because we're also advocating on behalf of the individuals that are facing the persecution, that are facing all of these death threats. So it's important for them to know that they have a community and they have a group that is advocating for them as well. It's also important to know about the legal assistance. There are a lot of organizations, there are a lot of NGOs, there are a lot of groups that are also protecting these defenders and these fighters, these activists, and we need to raise awareness about that as well. But most importantly, to take care of your mental health. It's important to take care of your mental health and to build resilience and resistance within the movement, to engage in nonviolent resistant methods, to civil disobedience, to not be afraid, and to stay together. That's the most important thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Shurabe. We'll take more questions, and I'll really request to respect the time. Everyone, like, be in the time because there are people online watching the next sessions as well. Do we have more questions in the room from anyone before we can, Leah?
It's a quick question, but I was just wondering, like, if you are like in the front line, protesting, and you end up getting arrested, and say you're doing that, and that happens quite often. If you want a job with the UN and they see that on your history, was that like a no?
I'll answer that.
Wait, I have not been arrested. Just want to say that.
And then we had another question.
Thank you. My name is Khalid. I'm working with an organization called Murham Volunteering Team. We are working with my colleague Sarah here every day with the refugee and IDPs. So we noticed that you are the youth. I just wanted to know or ask you this question and see your thought about this one. Did you do you feel there is a gap between the UN bodies, all the organizations, and the grassroots organization, and how we can, I don't want to say fix or do something, we wanted to change that, because we noticed that I'm sorry, I'm from Syria, so I noticed that since we like got into this situation, working with humanitarian organizations, do our job to help our people to like escape from the war or to help them after this situation. So as a youth, what we can do to change this like this situation or to change the policies at all? Thank you.
Okay, any one more last question we can take? Okay, I don't see more questions. Okay, perfect. So to answer your question, if you have been arrested, I've been arrested not twice but thrice. Okay, and that was many many years ago, but that was an extrajudicial arrest, and I was being tortured because I was a mainstream political activist, and I have never shared this story live. Now it's going live. Everyone can see that because I don't give a f about it now. So I was the president of the student union of Pakistan, of entire Pakistan. And I was very, very vocal in my words, in my thoughts, and in my activism. And a lot of people, young people, youth, and students were listening. One day, in broad daylight, right from the classroom, I was the PhD student at the time. I was picked up by the military and taken to a torture cell, and they never declared my arrest like on the papers. They just came into the classroom, put the mask on my face, and took me like they were trashing me like a football. They were making an example out of me. When they were doing that, that other young people will learn and will not raise their voices. But absolutely something else happened. Universities went into shutdown by the students in the next 5 minutes, and there was a chaos. They took their time because they were kicking me, they were beating me, they were trashing me, and they wanted me to give certain statements. They made me sign blank papers, and they made their own statements. When the thing went out, it was in the media. People raised their voice. It was on the social media. Then they have to let me go under certain conditions, and one of those was that I will never do a public speaking. I will never take a social media again. And third was the hardest one, I will not continue my education. I will never be allowed to go into the university again. Nothing can change that, but I did because I was traumatized. I'm a human being and they trashed me really well. I was traumatized. I did went back to the school to give my exam. When I was giving my exam, there were soldiers right outside the classroom looking at me, watching me as they came approach me. They said, "You were not allowed." I said, "Give me in writing. If being a student of in my university, if I'm not allowed, just give me in writing." They're like, "Okay, but you're not allowed to have a conversation with the students." I left university immediately when they had this conversation. I continued what I was doing. Then my home was raided again, and I was arrested again. And it happened twice or thrice, and every time they would excuse it, and then they have to put something in the news, so they just put it that I was coordinating a cyber attack or this and that, and etc. etc. Then I left the country. I finally, came to New York and then become part of the UN system. The ghost just did chased because when I become for the first time the co-chair of the civil society conference, the mission of my country did reached out and say that, okay, this person have been doing a lot of talking against the country, and I was very very open. The cause was humanitarian, and I did made it clear to my colleagues, bosses, people who I was working with, hey, this have been the situation. You'll Google my name, you'll find out that this have been the situation, and they have been really persecuting me extrajudicially. There was no judiciary involved or nothing, because military controls their everything. So that did happen to me. Situation is different now, but that did happen to me. People did talk to me about it, but I was on the path of righteous path. Nothing wrong was done, but everyone now understand that what happened, and that trauma that happened to me for the first time lead me to create this platform that you are in right now. That this was my response to it. This was my response to it. So this is how we choose to. This is when something happened to you, you need to know how you want to respond. You want to respond with rage, or you want to respond with excellence. And anything happened to my colleagues or they feel mad about something, I always tell them excellence is the only response that we should follow, because that will make you happy and make the world see. So it do happen. It was people did reach me out and did ask me that, hey, we are reached by the mission, and this have been done, you have been doing this, or this have happened, what's the story? So I give them the whole story, that this is what happened and nothing happened after that, and I've been doing really well into the system now. So it doesn't matter, don't worry about it. And you're right, you're right.
All right, so I want to quickly lift up. I have a whole. I don't know if you can see this. It's like a whole list of things. Yeah. So maybe to start with movement building and thinking about like theory behind this, I'd highly encourage you all to look up Bill Moyer's movement action plan and the 4 roles of activism. Right, recognizing that like yes, in ecosystems and spaces where making noise is dangerous to the well-being of your own life and those in your community, there a multiplicity of ways in which you can show up as an individual and as a community to help further a cause, right? And the theory behind how movements are built and how they win, I think, will help guide and inform what is potentially feasible. The second piece, thinking about educating and passing on language and ideas and information to the younger generation for their daily lives. I think we have this phrase in Chinese we call 传承, and essentially it's like to pass on the torch, right? Or to like light the candle in someone else's heart. And I think the work that we do at the end of the day, we can't do it alone. We have to inspire and we have to like hold space for others to come into the ecosystem to continue to do that work. In relation to refugees and closing the gap, one of the key challenges that the UN faces is that it's a member state driven process, right? So oftentimes if the member state doesn't let the UN into a space, they don't have much like power to be able to create any operations. Tsuji does refugee relief work in Turkey with Syrian refugees. And so what we found is that like within the country, we needed to step in as a faith-based organization and create like a school. And so we hired Syrian teachers, and then we specifically for Syrian refugees, right? But this whole structure and this whole ecosystem had to go through like the structures of the government as well, right? And so that sort of gap that is like government driven also plays into a similar narrative that my brother was speaking to earlier about how do we engage at an international level and the difficulties of engaging with diplomats, right? Because at the end of the day, the UN can almost be seen as a international platform of consensus created at a national level of consensus created at a local level, right? And so if we can't shape the local consensus, if we can't shape the national consensus, oftentimes at the international level, the diplomats are just saying, well, my home country tells me I can do X, Y, Z, and that's it, right? And so if we need to, we can push from the top, but also we need to push from the bottom as well. And finally, I think recognizing that there's never enough time, I just want to quickly lift up, Tsuji does offer training for young people, and we offer it through this program called the International Young Leaders Program Fellowship. And through this program, it's a year-long training where we kind of show people how to engage with the UN, and then we provide fully funded opportunities for youth to implement projects, go to like different humanitarian sites and spaces to coordinate work, and then also advocate and engage at the United Nations on behalf of our organization. And if that's something you're interested in, please like reach out afterwards and we'd be happy to connect. And then finally, is this, I think in closing, I really want to lift up like the importance of healing, right? I think today and like yesterday and the next couple of days, you'll hear hard stories, you'll hear about tremendous work, you'll hear inspiration. But I think behind all of this, there's also pain, and there's a lot of suffering, whether it's like just being exposed to these communities. And it's important to also find ways to heal and take care of yourself. And if you don't have that, please reach out and I'd be happy to talk more about that.
Oh, and then one more thing super quickly. I also wanted to respond to your question and say that I think the youth of today is a lot more focused on like longevity than, past generations have been. And I think that youth is a lot focused on like they're focusing a lot more on how can we not only remedy this issue but make sure it doesn't happen again and down the line, and how can we actually create sustainable change. And sustainable has a lot of different meanings: sustainable for the earth, sustainable for the time, sustainable for the people. So I definitely think that the youth of today is like working really hard to make sure that change is not a band-aid but a real solution.
Thank you so much. So that will conclude our session now. Next session is starting in like 3 minutes, 2 minutes. And we already see the prestigious speakers. Do attend these sessions. They're going to be really engaging and wonderful because you'll be listening from the experts and you'll love it, I'm sure. Thank you so much for attending session. So over to the moderator of the session.